Hey everybody, this is Rydo, and today we're looking at Indiana Jones and the Emperor's Tomb. We tried to play the game before this, which was Indiana Jones and the Infernal Machine, but honestly it was just such a first generation Tomb Raider 1, not the reboot of Tomb Raider 1, but the original Tomb Raider 1 ripoff, that there was just nothing there to really enjoy by modern standards. When you launched this game, which this was in 2003, so 4 years after the 1999 Infernal Machine, you get the classic Lucas Arts logo. So we're back to that, but you also get a logo for the Collective, which was a company that was defunct in 2007 and almost exclusively made licensed games. Da Vinci Code, they Mark Echo's Getting Up Contents Under Pressure, I guess, is a non-license. A Star Wars Episode 3 game, a X-Files game, a Buffy the Vampire Slayer game, a Star Trek Deep Space Nine game, and a Men in Black game. They also made The Game of Life in 1998. So the point mostly to take from that, I imagine, is this is just yet another game that has the Indiana Jones and LucasArts label on it that's not being made by those original point and click people, developers at LucasArts. Basically they're gone. There's some problems with this game from the beginning, in that when you get into the options, by default, you're at a resolution that is 640 by 480, which would normally be fine, except for the fact that when I was trying to go to the right to increase the resolution, the next resolution set above that crashed. So the only way I could even get to its highest resolution of 1280 by 960 is to go into the configuration file, find it effectively in the program. There's a configuration file, and I found a setting that said don't open it in full screen mode. So it was like full screen mode :1. I changed it to 0, binary, true or false. Then it launched in a window. Then, because it was in a window mode, Windows 10 wouldn't crash there. Now, this wasn't a crash to full reboot, it was just a crash to desktop, but these old games are trying to use resolutions that are not even listed really in compatibility modes with Windows 10. It's just such a low resolution. 640 by 480, yes, supported. Whatever the next one would have been, which maybe it would have been somewhere around 720 by 600, that may have not been the resolution to support. And you can see even here we're still not getting up to 1980 by 1080, which would be a 1080p resolution. Instead, what we have is a black bar on the left and right at 1280 by 960. We have a bit depth of 32, which is pretty good, and compared to the Infernal Machine, which just had its own separate launchers for each level and didn't even have like an interface for the purchasing of items in between levels. It was just a window, Windows window. There is massive progress in 4 years. So this would be what I would define as a second generation 3D game. I turned on subtitles, they were off by default. I turned on gamepad control, it was off by default. So now I'm playing with an Xbox 360 controller, or Xbox Core controller, whatever. I guess at this point it is an Xbox Core controller I'm using. You have options here to invert both in first person and third person, which is pretty good. We're getting a lot of Chinese gong sounds. You have separate audio options. I generally still prefer that audio starts with the sliders in the exact middle. That way you have as much room as possible to turn the music up, turn the music down, sound effects up, sound effects down, voice up, voice down. We know there's going to be voice acting. After the fate of Atlantis, it would be really crazy to have any game that didn't have voice acting in it in an Indiana Jones game, since that was definitely a major sales point and very well received, was the voice acting. Now here's where it's going to get potentially hard to decide. I guess we'll start our normal, but I could see this game being very frustrating with not having enough rewarding gameplay in it to justify even playing on normal. But yeah, you can see how we have a full interface here, on top of artifacts, which are probably collectibles. This definitely feels like a game that would have been released on a console. And actually, I had that information up, so why don't I just check my phone and confirm? Yes, this was a Xbox, PlayStation 2, and Windows and OS X Apple computer game. So there are limitations put on game developers, rules and regulations as to what you can do on a menu. And limitations is the wrong word to really use. It's requirements. And once those requirements, even on the original Xbox, even on the PlayStation 2, came into order, you started to see a very standardized menu that would have these kinds of interactions and these start screens. Ironically, we now are pushing towards more of the idea that we would like to just start a game and load directly into the game instead of having to fiddle with options. Particularly on PC, you don't want to have to fiddle with configuration files. It is shocking how many old games are allowed on Steam when they just absolutely don't launch without fiddling with it. Particularly considering how Steam is about to drop support for like Windows 7 and 8 and 8.1. I guess we should jump into the game, though. So this is a second generation 3D game by my general idea of where I would define generations of 3D, whereas the Infernal Machine was almost certainly a first generation 3D game in my definition. But I'm not even sure that the first generation Indiana Jones and the Infernal Machine was released on consoles at all. If it was, it would have been PlayStation 1 exclusively, because it wouldn't have been on the Xbox, and not at launch. That's interesting that we made a new game and then we also have to hit start. Very redundant there. So what are we looking for? We're looking for major improvements compared to Infernal Machine, in that we want to be introduced to characters that will talk and interact and have more story. We want a much wider diversity in gameplay mechanics. We're seeing some loading. We can see in the 3D models, it looks a lot better.
According to the map, that stone head marks the secret entrance to the lost city beyond the city lies the temple of Black Goddess, and inside the island who want to. Closeness now.
Yeah, you can see major improvements. Major improvements as far as just what you're getting as far as the polygon count. You can see his hands have individual fingers and they aren't just little triangles. You can see Indy looks really good. Now in the Infernal Machine, all the other characters looked awful compared to Indiana Jones, so we'll keep an eye out for that. We can see a skybox from this angle showing us a lot more, although it is fairly obvious that it is a skybox. We can see a few birds flying around. In a lot of ways, this is almost exactly one for one what the first starting point of the Infernal Machine was, but we do have this idle animation. So we can WASD, and we're getting a tutorial now, and we can see the skeletons here look way better than Infernal Machine. Even at the time, if you could do this, it would make a lot of sense to copy. Interesting, there's just 3 birds here. You could have potentially just copied the same idea and level and story of the Infernal Machine and remastered it, but this definitely would not have been the era of bothering to remaster things. Walking through obstacles, press spacebar and forward to make him jump and catch. The controls here are incredibly well improved. Like, if I push a little on the left stick, he's actually crawling. Press C quickly to reset the camera back to behind Indy. Let's see if we can figure out if there's a button that would do that on the controls. This is boxing mode with left bump. Right trigger, left trigger not doing anything. It's not really surprising that a left bump and a right bump might do something and the left trigger and the right trigger wouldn't, because the addition of both of those really wouldn't have been commonplace in games. A is jump. X seems to do nothing at the moment. Y is just a fast punch. So immediately it does seem like there's going to be more of a focus around punching instead of shooting, which in the Infernal Machine was very much a shooting game. B is also a punch, so it's kind of inverted because the Y button is swinging his right hand, but the Y button is on the left of the gamepad compared to the B button, which is on the left, on the right, and it's swinging his right hand. So it might make some sense to swap those 2 buttons out, although it may not really matter, because if you're just gonna smash and punch like that, it may not matter. Although, if it does matter, it might very well matter. When I hit the back button, we can see we have a map, a whip, a revolver, which has 6 shots in it, and a canteen. To use any of these items, I don't know how you would use them. Let's see. This. If I want to use this map, A, B, X, Y is not doing anything, and it's not pausing the game. So this is block, I guess, when you left bump. And when you're blocking, you can still punch. Interesting. So it seems like some of these buttons are a little bit weird. The start button pulls out the whip. The back button switches to items. And then the left click pauses the game. So that just doesn't seem like that would be the right actions. Somersault is gamepad button 9. The bigger numbers would mean something more. Inventory next is button 6. Inventory close is down. Guard mode is game button 4. Noticing that there are some options that are just not mapped. And I wonder if I couldn't just reset some of these to like the right trigger. Let's see. Nope, right trigger is not doing anything. And seemingly once you label something, you have to just leave it connected to something. We are still yeah, we're still very much in a situation where you're having to fiddle with the menus and figure out the controls, even though a lot of this is natural and there is room for this game to actually be playable all the way through. I could also run into situations where it seems like it wants me to fight something and it's giving me a health bar in the top left, which that is a change because the health bar was a weird 3-circle system in the Infernal Machine. I won't be able to compare myself too much to the Infernal Machine since I only played it for like 3 hours. Press the E key to pick up items nearby. I pressed the X button and that worked. Artifacts like that statue can be found hidden throughout the game. Very noticeably compared to the Infernal Machine, I am just standing in front of it, I press the button once and it works. There's no, you have to line things up perfectly situation. There's also no lighter in our inventory, so they're going to better address the possibility of some darkness by just having better lighting in the game, instead of just assuming that somebody wants to pull up a flashlight mode in an Indiana Jones game. Run forward and press the space button to make Indy do a running jump. I guess at this point also we don't have any way to save scum. So if I die in this game, I suspect it is just going to checkpoint me. Although in that case, I really wouldn't have died. This is the same skeleton. We'll probably see that reused a lot. Interesting. You have this like stealth wall that if you're standing next to a wall, you can get behind it and sneak. So this may be an actual stealth game. If I click this, this is how you go in the first person mode with the right stick. Okay. How am I supposed to pull out the gun though? I really need to know how to pull out the gun. Let me just press down on the control and see if that worked. Right. Next item. Down on the keyboard. Up. Oh, on the keyboard worked to bring that up. Okay. So then How can we, like, where's the up button mapped? It's not mapped to anything from what I can tell. Inventory open up. Inventory next is up. Okay. Inventory close is up. Wall hug left, walk left alt. Okay. So I think the move here is to probably, let's see what we can do. Is there a button here that would pause? First of all, because that's really weird that the click is opening the menu. No, left click would be labeled as a button. So what we want to do is probably open the inventory with that button on the D-pad, which it's not registering any of the D-pads, so let's then go click gamepad 8 to open the inventory. Gamepad 8 was not being used for anything else. And then start button as far as inventory next, that is being labeled as gamepad 7. Draw / pack. What was that? Now what button is this? 5 is a reload button, so we don't have that as an option. Right. So I'm just gonna unmap that one. Map that one. And I think that's probably the way this is supposed to actually work. Or at least it is the best way to get this to work. And we are not making a lot of progress on the game. Symbols at the top right screen give clues how Indy can interact with something. So we're still in tutorial mode, but we'll also have to make our own tutorial mode. So now I'm pressing the back button and nothing is happening. Clicking this still goes into the menu. I didn't get the button right. Alright. This draws and packs based on what weapon is equipped. And this right bump would reload. Interesting, he goes into breathing mode when you draw a gun. I definitely feel like the gun, let's try this again, should be an instant win. Yeah. It really should probably just be an instant win when you pull out the gun to admit that you just don't want to fight that person. So we've got 4, 9, 6, and then 9 doing somersault and first person. Which maybe that'll be a problem. but nothing else seems to overlap. So let's see if we got that now. Yes. So now I can pull up the menu, but I can't switch the menu. There's no button to swap to the next item. Well, let's go back to the default options and see if maybe there was something there that I was just not understanding. These Chinese sound effects. So you swap like this, start like this. I want to go to the whip. There's no way to press up on the whip. Wait, how did I do that? So do you have to just wait for it to fade? Or are there just some items that you can't switch between? Yeah, there's just some items you can't use. So if you're on the gun and you press the start button, so you're pressing the back button to get over the revolver, you press the start button, you'll pull out the revolver. If you press the back button and you're over the whip, and you press the start button, you'll go to the whip. This is awkward controls, to say the least. And other items, such as the map, just don't seem to be things you can pull up using the controller. I'll just have to use the keyboard. So this is not full keyboard support. It is very nice in video games that you can actually work on the more difficult things these days. Ray tracing, 3D modeling, things like that. And just rely on solved solutions to generic problems that modern gamers wouldn't even think about. It would just be like so obvious that certain buttons. So we need a machete to cut through that. Interesting. I wonder if this is a machete.
I can use this water to fill up my canteen.
When low on health, equip the canteen and hold the left mouse button to replenish Indy's health. So that they definitely are giving us mouse and keyboard things. Alright. So we have the canteen in our inventory. And that would be the B button that we just used. But it seems to me like you can only get so much it's crazy, you'd be just drinking random water. Yeah, it seems like your water levels can only be so high compared to your health. levels. Yeah. Your average gamer would just say it's so obvious that things should just work and feel very much like good simulations of what you would expect to happen in a realistic world. Yes, there are a lot of games that have unrealistic elements also, but the running, the jumping, the buttons being in the right place. Press E to pick up nearby objects. How cautious do I need to be as far as traps? Well, we're gonna have checkpoints to block our way. Drop down safely, press and hold the shift key while walking off. Okay. I just fell. I don't feel like I did anything special there. What's up on the inventory items? So even if I hadn't spent the extra time trying to figure out the controllers myself and then failing miserably and just realizing that the default controllers were as good as I was going to get, we would have hit this point. Did that hurt me a little bit? Almost certainly we will. Yeah, that did hurt me. Yeah, I'm gonna need to figure out how to safely drop down, or I'm gonna take a lot of fall damage. So let's see what that looks like when it's easy to get stuck on this geometry still, and his hands and feet are, well, his feet are getting stuck through the geometry quite a bit. Right. So I'm gonna press and hold the shift key. Oops, fell off. Maybe don't teeter on the edge first. Press and hold the shift key. That didn't do anything. Now I pressed the right shift key. Maybe I needed to press and hold the left shift key. Of course, playing with a controller and pressing the left shift key. Maybe you can only really do that at certain ledges. But I'm definitely losing health here. Alright, I'm gonna put the controller completely down, hold the left shift key, and I guess do WASD. Which, yeah, I guess since we're in inventory, we'll also ask. WASD. Well, there are no keys on the keyboard that seem to control movement anymore. The arrow keys don't work. The WASD doesn't work. The number pads don't work. So we got our health back. Oh, and you have to actually hold it to fill it to the maximum. Okay. We learned. Wall hug peek left. It says walk is left alt. What if we were to make it gamepad 8 instead? That won't work. They've just hard-coded the left click to bring up the menu. I mean, it's just like a really weird place to put your menu. Because we can see it's gamepad 8 and nothing else is gamepad 8. They were saying this was like left alt. I'll make it right alt instead, since I can't map the left trigger and right trigger, and I can't map the D-pad as separate things. It might be worth it to get rid of first person mode instead. Well, just holding the button, you are in a walk mode here. But the prompts was shift, not alt. Still, you're still taking damage for even a small fall. So we might very well be in a situation where you are going to constantly take fall damage just because the game has not really got a button or got the right button mapped. Alright. Now I'd expect X would interact with this, but it's actually B. Indy getting fairly winded. But I do appreciate the idea of a machete. Equip the whip, then press and hold the left mouse button. This is, as a second generation game, you just held the B button there and let go. Again, if I'd fallen, it wouldn't have really killed me. As a second generation game, though, you can see how they're keeping the interface very much within the frame of a 640 by 480 image. It would make a lot more sense for the inventory items to spread out and have dots on the left and right for 5 of them, if not 7 of them. And when you have an interaction button pop up, it's not in the far corner. It's making a very wide dead zone in case you have a older monitor that might be cropping some of the edges. And then we're just supposed to walk forward for loading. Now, not a lot happened in that level, that little tutorial level, but that's a good place to see potentially a checkpoint being created. And we are learning, I guess, that not all skeletons lead to treasures. It will just be random treasures or random skeletons. It is now just a question about whether is this getting us familiar with the idea of doing a lot of macheting in the game, or is this just really stalling for time. Let's see. We have this map, and I would have to assume that we started at the very bottom, slightly to the right, where it says Head Monument, and we've gotten maybe one treasure already, and maybe we missed a treasure even. But if this map is to be believed, and this is the entire level, it's not the biggest level ever, but it looks like it may be big enough.
I rehearse. These guys are no Boy Scouts. Better watch my back.
There's a lot of dead bodies just randomly placed. I suspect if you were doing an archaeological dig, the idea of just there being a lot of random bodies left to rot is probably not how you typically find digs. Punch by pressing left or right, mouse button, press in succession to do combos, press and hold, left shift to target or block enemy attacks. Alright. So it seems like you can get a 3-hit combo. And that was quite the thing. I'm gonna make you eat that whip, he says, without actually saying it. Now, if difficulty is just gonna boil down to how much do you have to punch somebody, then I probably would lean towards lowering the difficulty. Can we lower the difficulty? Doesn't seem like we can, so we might have a problem there. I might be able to go into the save file and lower the difficulty and cheat that way. Let's see. As far as interacting with this guy and searching him, it doesn't seem like there's anything to do there. So now I guess they're getting us used to the idea that we'll cut other objects. So now we've had general platforming, hacking and slashing ropes and vines, and punching as a gameplay mechanic on top of hidden object. Let's find the collectibles. Is it beneficial to heal up as soon as possible? I'd say probably. I like how this tutorial section here is not really trying to have enemies that are too big to start with. Noticeably, we're not trying to fight Nazis or Russians to begin with. Can I get around this wall though? No. Do we have a stealth takedown? Ooh, we have a kick. So get up there and just start kicking them. Now, I find it interesting that that one guy disappeared and the other guy didn't. So we could potentially climb up, back up here, if necessary. Although it may be too high to jump. What are we looking for? Indy might find something useful if he breaks nearby boxes. I guess not. Revolver ammo. We did find one thing. But I don't like the idea of games. Certainly in a modern game, you wouldn't want to break 3 boxes and find only 1 item. That is definitely old school, adding difficulty for no reason, or adding grinding for no reason. Let's see. Do I think that I could shoot this guy? I have a shovel as a weapon. But I honestly think if I was able to pull this, you have to hold the right stick down and target. So I'm basically going to have to do it with my left hand, my left thumb. And then shoot it. I think that might work. But it might be easier to stealth. See if we could just stealth right past them and see if maybe I could just cut the rope. Which would make maybe a little bit more sense. Yes, on a modern game, the idea would totally be around the concept of shooting it. No.
There he is.
Okay. Ready to hit. Just get a nice corner going. So one's down. That was a very weird jump up on somebody and kick maneuver. I would think that would be something more in line with what you would expect. Interesting that some people disappear and some people don't. I would expect a Wolverine Marvel superhero type game to potentially have that kind of attack. Liquor bottle. Attack using objects. Well, you can see how you're really still making a fighting game here. And yes, there's a lot of action in an Indiana Jones movie, so it's not crazy that you would punch a bunch of people, or fight them with a shovel, or fight them with a liquor bottle. Okay, I'm supposed to whip up that direction. Am I supposed to do something with the birds, or are the birds always just going to be hints towards other things? just having a water refill here. It's not really enough, but we'll take it. Yeah, I forgot the buttons already. Looks like you might drop down from there, but probably not. Notably though, it doesn't seem like we can get over to this other side. It feels like there would be things to do. Can I have a better chance of pulling this off? Well, part of the problem is the shot button is the B button. So I thought we were going to go up here, but on second appearance we are going over here. So that makes a lot more sense. To hold B, then release. That's very smooth. Music here. It's pretty intense. Can get around tight areas by wall hugging, walk to the wall and press E, in this case the X button. Then get away from wall hugging. Wall hugging definitely not in the infernal machine. Okay. I don't see how you could have stealthed all the way around to get to this point, but obviously that was the goal, was to save yourself on some punches, save yourself on some damages, although it doesn't really matter as long as you find the health refill. So we are moving definitely towards a more modern game in that what you do if you play poorly won't really matter that much. There will be ways in which they accommodate you. It seems fairly obvious that I'm supposed to whip myself across the ledge, but the ledge doesn't exist. Walk to walls covered in vines and you can climb up them. That's a new gameplay mechanic. Of course that also means I could have just... Oh, at least I think maybe hitting the wrong button, or maybe I'm just in the wrong place. Like, I've got the whip, I'm pressing the B button, and you have to be really close to the ledge to pull it off. And I suspect this might be the first case in which, had I fallen, I would have actually died. And unlike modern games, I think that probably would have just killed me. And who's to say when the next checkpoint, or the last checkpoint would have been. It could be all the way back to the beginning of the level, or at least this section of the level. There we fell and took some fall damage from very low height. And it doesn't seem like there's anything special. Doesn't seem like you can get there. So it's getting a little artsy. Indy is a little bit more scaled down in this game compared to the Infernal Machine, so when he falls a full Indy height down, or him taking fall damage, feels a little wimpy. Press spacebar to make him dive under the surface, or A button. On the controller, we do have an oxygen meter, and in this case it does seem to be depleting at a much more rapid rate than in the Infernal Machine, where it seemed like you could swim around forever. You just press to a ledge to get up, and then you put the hat back on. Same basic concepts. Honestly, probably the Infernal Machine's animations and level design concepts led to the creation of this game, so it is probably just a 4-year evolution of taking the same ideas and polishing them better. We're going to be spending a lot of time doing this. We're still not hitting the levels of regenerative health or anything like that, so that would make a little bit more sense to me. Is okay. So there must either be an underwater section or a wall hug section. Doesn't seem like there's a wall hug there. Or there may be a wall raising puzzle. A water raising puzzle. Look around. And it really doesn't seem like there's anything here. Is this supposed to be something? Nope, that's just decoration. I could see an argument for turning down the music. It's just a little too intense and a little too cyclical. Maybe what I'm supposed to do is run from that corner to there. This definitely could be, like many second generation games, an issue where we get fairly confusing pathfinding. I can't climb that like a ladder, can I? So I guess I'm going this way. Put space forward and forward to make Indy jump and grab the ledge above. We're getting tutorials that may be a little redundant. Yeah. And this is just bringing us to a very high area. See that vine? To Indy, run and jump toward it to grab it. Or deal with this guy. Headshots seem to actually matter. It's important still to point out that yes, I could say that this is somewhat of a Tomb Raider ripoff, although I would say as a second generation game it's probably closer to a Tomb Raider 3 ripoff than a Tomb Raider 1 ripoff. Tomb Raider 3 being the original Tomb Raider 3, not the third game in the Tomb Raider reboot. But if you just started to call every platforming game of this era a Tomb Raider ripoff, you're gonna very quickly start to label almost everything as that. Okay. I am uncertain as to how I am supposed to proceed. It looks like I could make that jump. I have one shotgun shell, so not really a lot you could do with that. You just gotta make sure your aim is true, and being a shotgun, you assume you're gonna have to be close to somebody to shoot them, not try to snipe somebody with a shotgun. Perhaps this is to indicate we are supposed to go in that direction, or maybe it's to indicate that we're coming back through this way. The floor indicates to me, since there's this little cutout, I'm supposed to make this jump. And it seems like the game is very inconsistent as far as like whether you take fall damage or not, based on whether it's a pre-programmed jump or not. Or maybe it's more of a case that if he is actively doing something, there's a lot more action happening in this game compared to the Infernal Machine, with floors disappearing and breaking and people appearing. And I mean, it is really a huge amount of progress, considering how I would really just call this one generation of improvement. And weirdly, if I was to start to say if this is a 2003 and that's a second generation 3D platformer game in my mind, which I'm just making up these generation descriptions, I'm sure somebody else would have a different definition of what would define a first or second generation 3D game. A third generation 3D game is not going to be anywhere as different. The polygons and graphics will look a little bit better, and maybe there will be some more collectibles, and maybe some more gameplay mechanics, but probably just one gameplay mechanic extra, one or two on average. Like when you look at the Tomb Raider reboot, activate levers and switches. Let's see what that does. That frees people to come shoot at me. Wall hug. Alright. They used all of my bullets, and that one shotgun shell proved itself to be very useless. We didn't take a lot of damage. I appreciate that. I also severely appreciate that we aren't getting bitten by spiders or snakes like in the Infernal Machine, and then getting poisoned, and then having to struggle to try and find health kits that were barely refilling my health. I do, however, suspect, now that we've introduced people shooting at me, that the boxing mechanic will be fairly infrequent. One of the things that's a problem, this level is also going very long, is when you start to think about what a open world 3D game with platforming is, when you start getting to a third generation or possibly fourth or fifth generation, whatever you would potentially consider we're at now, I think probably the generations in my mind would slow down, and I would say we're probably closer to a fourth or fifth generation than we are a sixth, eighth, or ninth generation. It's not just a matter of every 4 years. I think generations changed in 3D platforming games. I think it's when there was like major technology improvements. But even when you get to a third generation, you run into this issue where there is not really anything that is just going to purely be defined as a 3D platformer like this game, or like Indiana, Lara Croft and Tomb Raider. You start to have games that have 3D platforming that are more like Assassin's Creed, which totally gets away from puzzle platforming in most scenarios. Actually, let's just sit on the let's sit on the pause screen. I guess that's the best place to sit. So yeah, Assassin's Creed totally changes the game and makes it much more of a wall climbing game and building climbing or free climbing for an open 3D world game. And there is massive amounts of collectibles in Assassin's Creed games. But then you also have Mirror's Edge, which is a parkour running game, which also technically might be 3D platforming, but maybe you don't really describe it as that. Like, you start to get into these branching things where you would call something a parkour game like Mirror's Edge, or you'd call something a climbing game like Assassin's Creed. And as the branches diverged, there was very little room left to have something that would be like this, where you're 3D platforming. You also have Mario 64. Clearly, this would have been after Mario 64, but Super Mario 64 creates a very different type of 3D platforming game focused around doing very bespoke quests to earn very specific stars. What you do to earn a star is different almost every time, and it's a more smooth, low risk bouncing around jumping game, whereas this game has a lot of fall damage, so we couldn't just willy-nilly jump around and fall over and over again, and eventually I would just die. So yeah, it gets harder and harder to define it. Even when you get into the Tomb Raider reboot game, that game is barely a 3D platformer at all. It's much more of a linear cinematic RPG game where you're going through a narrative and you're finding collectibles to upgrade your abilities, to mostly hunt with a bow. So it kind of is a narrative hunting game. Ironically, Indiana Jones games should have existed throughout all of these generations and still should be super popular. But Lara Croft, Tomb Raider stole the show, and then eventually Uncharted, Nathan Drake stole some of the show for PlayStation fans in particular. And LucasArts gave up on making video games effectively and so there was no LucasArts video games, and there was no Steven Spielberg Indiana Jones movies for a very long time. That was another point I wanted to make, is that when we first heard that line of dialogue at the beginning of this game an hour and 10 minutes ago, that sounded like a much older Harrison Ford, but it's still very believable that it was Harrison Ford. His voice has just kind of changed over the years between him just getting older and him being a fairly consistent smoker of marijuana. I'm sure that changes your voice after a long enough time too. But we still don't have that secondary character yet. And this is a really long tutorial mission. And I still would stand by the idea that Indiana Jones is best when he is not alone. He needs some character next to him to prove that he is smart and to explain things and talk about things. Otherwise, he often comes off as somebody who's just mumbling to himself or speaking out loud to himself when there's nobody else around. He does well when there's a damsel in distress or a sidekick in distress that he needs to save. He is definitely built around those archetypes of having a damsel in distress or a sidekick in distress. And then I want to end this episode here because looking at this map, it seems fairly obvious that we just got to about the halfway point. It seems to me very much that that's the case. In fact, it implies to me that we are very close to another collectible. And I very possibly did miss a collectible, but I don't think I would be able to go back and get it because there was a checkpoint. I do have a concern certainly about how many load sections equate to how many checkpoints, but also the game on normal difficulty doesn't seem like I'd likely die. So we're in a much better position here, despite having to struggle to figure out control settings, having to struggle to get the game to work at all on Windows 10. This is one of those games that, because it's at a weird resolution, there's a little bit of a white noise in a 1 pixel column on the left of the screen. I don't believe my recording software is picking that up, but it might be. And that's, at least on this screen, that's the case. I don't see the white noise on this screen. Of course, this also puts me in a weird position where I need to get to a point where I know I've fairly saved so I can exit out of the game to do anything else. Because if I try to alt-tab this, the game will probably crash. And if I just were to quit, I feel like I would lose all progress. There's very possibly not even going to be a warning if I did quit. A long level, too. And that was one of the things I found when doing the second level of the Infernal Machine, is that the level was about 2 hours when the first level was about 1. And even as a second generation 3D platform adventure game, there is obviously some room for improvement to break up the levels a little bit. Although they are trying to balance that with the idea of having much bigger areas and levels, which was definitely a major sales point. We still have echoes, though, of game developers making certain games to promote certain ideas, running and gunning and shooting, which is not so much what you would expect in an Indiana Jones adventure. You'd expect a little bit of it, but we've done quite a bit of it in this first episode. And just large environments, large open worlds, even if the large open worlds in this case are just little arenas connected in linear fashion. Anyways, I don't want to go on too far. That's going to be it for this recording. As always, I ask you to like, share, subscribe, comment, and watch every second of my videos. If you want to support me further, there's some links down below in the description box. Thank you for watching. Have a good evening.